Pitchers and catchers report tomorrow. Here are the prospects we're watching in spring training.
You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On MLB Prospects, your home for all things minor league baseball. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby, award-winning baseball writer and podcaster, and thank you for making this your first listen every single day. We're proudly part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and today's episode's made possible by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers, join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So we are now done with the farm system previews. Again, 6 weeks of shows. We went through every single team's farm system, talked about the prospects you should see in 24, prospects you need to know about, top prospects, things like that. So if you're on YouTube, there's a playlist for it. If you're on an audio feed, it's the last 6 weeks of shows, Tuesday through Saturday. Go back and check those out. But catching up on questions we got in the mailbag. And another good one from Maurice is he asked about things, prospects we're watching for in spring training, and then specifically who pulls a Jordan Walker in 2023 and earns themselves a major league spot on opening day because of their spring training performance. And as a reminder, Jordan Walker in spring training last year in 20 games batted .277 with a .492 slugging, hit 3 home runs, had 8 extra base hits of his 18 total hits, 2 walks to 15 strikeouts, earned an opening day spot. Didn't stay up all year. He got set down briefly early and then came back because of some defensive issues in right field. But prospects we're going to be watching for, and then the guys we think could pop in spring training. So the top 2 prospects that I have to watch for, honestly, I can't say Jackson Holliday. He is in this list, but the top 2 guys I have to watch for, Jackson Chourio and Colt Keith, because they were the 2 prospects that signed extensions prior to having debuted. And the Brewers have said that Jackson Chourio has every possible chance to earn a job on opening day, to earn a spot as the opening day center fielder. But he has very little time above Double-A. And so it's not in any way, I think, a guarantee that you will see Jackson Chourio on opening day, but I'm a believer that his talent is good enough. He is a good enough player where he could be your opening day starter in center field, and I think it would go perfectly fine. It does become a little bit of a question about where does everybody play on this team. I assume you DH Christian Yelich, so then you've got Jackson Chourio in center. You've got Val Frelick, you've got Garrett Mitchell, you've got Joey Wiemer. Where does everybody play? You've already seen them make some trades to get rid of some guys, but you still have more outfielders than you have spots. So it becomes an interesting conversation there. And this is assuming that you've got guys like Blake Perkins and stuff that stay in the minors and aren't options at the major league level. You've still got more outfielders than you have spots for. So curious to see what happens here. Curious in general what the Brewers do. It's just going to be a really interesting spring. We've seen them trade Corbin Burns, but then also sign Rhys Hoskins to a 2-year deal. Gary Sanchez signed last week. Just an interesting offseason for Milwaukee. Curious what Jackson Chourio does. Colt Keith. I feel like there's a better path to an opening day spot for Colt Keith because you've seen Detroit actively like Nick Maton. They trade Nick Maton after DFAing him. They trade Tyler Nevin. Both these guys go to the Orioles. Why are the Orioles trading for infielders? They have a million of them. But they've been clearing space for Colt Keith to be the opening day second baseman. And so it could be a thing where you've got Spencer Torkelson at first, Riley Green when he comes back, DH or right field. You've got Javi Baez at short. You've got Colt Keith at second, Zach McKinstry at third. I feel like both these guys are the favorites to make the opening day roster. I want to see how their spring training goes. But I am watching Jackson Holliday. We had this conversation multiple times now. We had it in the Orioles episode last week. We had it in December when we did one of these spots about teams that had too much talent at any one position. Is where does Jackson Holliday play? Is it second base? Is it shortstop? There's a lot of different ways to configure this roster. A lot of the feedback that I got on the show, on the YouTube comments from Saturday from the Orioles preview, is that a lot of people agreed that Jackson Holliday at second base isn't the worst idea in the world to ease him into everything. So we'll see if that's what happens, but I am going to be watching to see what he does. Wyatt Langford is a guy that I'm going to watch for, and I honestly think he's probably one of my two guys that I am giving that Jordan Walker treatment to of I think Wyatt Langford, with a strong spring, can cement his place on the roster. So after getting drafted, reminder, 44 games, he made it all the way to AAA, 360, 480, 677, 10 homers, 29 extra base hits, 36 walks to 34 strikeouts, 12 of 15 on stolen bases. Now, I got a question about this, and I've addressed this sometime back in December. I do think that guys like Wyatt Langford, who move so quickly from level to level, there is the possibility of they don't spend enough time at any one level for their weaknesses to really begin to get exposed. The most he played at any one level was Hickory, high A Hickory, and he got 24 games and just over 100 plate appearances. He finished with exactly 200 plate appearances in the minors last year. So it was 1/3 of an MLB season, and we've seen plenty of guys go on heaters at the MLB level for a third of a season. Jared Walsh was an MVP, or he was an all-star. He was an all-star for the Angels, and then got DFA 2 years later. There was injury concerns and things like that in there, but still, big deal. Now, the metrics that we have for Wyatt Langford are really good. His contact ability, 85% in the zone, 81 overall. His 90th percentile exit velo above 107. His chase rate like 15%. It's all good stuff. A lot of that was in the lower minors. And so Wyatt Langford's in that really interesting place of there's not a ton of a book on him on how to beat him. And he has enough natural talent where he could show out in spring training and get a spot. I don't know if that's the best thing to do for Wyatt Langford or for the Texas Rangers, but I think it's possible. The other guy that I am watching in spring training, because I think he could also, from last year's draft, play his way into opening day with a great spring, is Matt Shaw of the Chicago Cubs. This one's a little bit tougher to make the case. He got 170 plate appearances last year, 38 games, and only 15 of those in the high minors in Double-A. But he batted .357, .400, .618 with 8 homers and 21 extra base hits. A lot of the numbers for him looked really good as far as contact rate of 85%, which was right there, slightly better than his college numbers. He had an 83% overall contact rate at Maryland and an 85% in the minors. And power-wise, 107 mile an hour, 90th percentile exit velocity. But here's the real reason that I'm watching Matt Shaw and think he could absolutely pop. And it's because the Cubs don't have a lot of great options for third base. When you look at the construction of the roster, they go out and they get Michael Busch is not a third baseman. Michael Busch can go stand at third base and he can field some balls and make the throws. Michael Busch is not a third baseman. He is a first baseman. And so right now, your lineup, it's not bad. Nick Madrigal could play third base. There's guys. Christopher Morel could go over there and stand over there as well. But Matt Shaw, and I was talking to somebody about this over the weekend, he reminds me a lot of Dansby Swanson as far as a guy that doesn't have a great arm, but has good range and good actions at short, and then is just really good in the clubhouse, a really good leader, things like that. And that's the kind of player that I think does well in spring training around the veterans. They really make an impression, and the type of guys that can play their way into an MLB spot. Now, do I think Matt Shaw is going to break spring training as the opening day third baseman? I don't. Again, he's barely played above Double-A. But if there's a handful of players outside of the obvious Jackson Holliday that you're going to watch in spring training with a chance to do it, I think Matt Shaw has a chance to do it. Also, just want to real quick, I'm watching the Rockies because they have a bunch of their top 10 prospects in camp, and none of the grand total of at-bats that these guys have in AAA is incredibly low. Adel Amador, the shortstop, who I think would be a killer second baseman next to Ezequiel Tovar, he's in spring training, never played in AAA. Yanquiel Fernandez and Jordan Beck, the outfielders, who super high on Jordan Beck, by the way, never played in AAA. Zach Veen, never played in AAA. Sterling Thompson, never played in AAA. Benny Montgomery, never played in AAA. Warming Bernabel, never played in AAA. Drew Romo, 4 games in AAA. That is the only prospect in the top 10 for Colorado that's played in AAA. But at the same time, if you're the Colorado Rockies, what do you have to lose? Let one of those guys play their way to the major league level. Let's see what happens. It's not like the major league team is going to lose more games, right? You have a ton of position player talent. Let's start figuring out which ones can be major league options by giving them a chance to contend for a job in spring training, and that's what the Rockies are doing. In just a minute, a couple players that we missed in the previews that we were asked about. We got some pitchers in segment 2, and then some guys out of the DSL in segment 3. We'll talk about them next, right here on Locked On MLB Prospects. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Now that the Super Bowl is over, you can get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams. They have quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive prop bets, and more. So, FanDuel.com/lockedon to shoot your shot with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On MLB Prospects. Before we talk about these pitchers that we didn't get to in these farm previews, I want to remind you, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now you can also find it on Amazon Fire TV. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows like this one, covering every single league. So find the Locked On Sports Today channel now on YouTube and Amazon Fire TV, and soon to come on Roku TV devices. Okay, so a couple pitchers that we did not get to that people specifically asked about from our farm previews. I went back through the last 6 weeks of YouTube comments, tweets, emails, trying to see all the guys that we missed and get them in here. Lacy, the first rounder in 2020 by the Kansas City Royals, had a question about what's going to happen to him. So number 4 overall pick, and he has been incredibly injured. He has had the absolute worst injury luck since getting drafted. He was drafted in 2020. Okay, so he did not get a 2020 season, right? But outside of that, he has a grand total in his entire minor league career of 80 innings. And the distribution of these isn't even necessarily that even. So 2021, he got 52 innings in high A. He went to the Arizona Fall League. I didn't count that in the 80 innings. He got 7 2/3 there. That's technically not the minors. I didn't count that. 22, he had some time. He had 20 innings in Double-A and 8 innings rehab-wise in rookie ball before I think it was a back injury ended his season. And it extended into 23, and he did not pitch in 23 at all in competitive games. He was doing stuff in spring training before it flared back up. He was doing instructional work. But Lacy did not appear in a game in 2023. So again, 80 innings in his minor league career, and he was drafted in 2020. And here's the worst part, okay? You took a college pitcher, number 4 overall, and not only have you gotten 80 innings out of him, but they weren't even that good of innings. His ERA in these 80 innings is a 7.09. He's had 114 strikeouts. That's like 12.8 per 9. Great strikeout rate, right? 83 walks, 9.3 per 9. And only like 8 home runs allowed, which is not less than 1 per 9 innings. But this is a scenario where, like, you literally, he was made eligible for the Rule 5 in December, and nobody took him. It is a number 4 overall pick that was unprotected and not selected in the Rule 5 draft. There is no hope, or there is no expectation to get number 4 overall pick production out of Lacy. The question now is, can he get back onto a field and can he get meaningful innings? I don't even think the question now is, can he make it to MLB? The question is, can he pitch again? And now, at this point, no expectations, right? Whatever he does is great because, one, nobody's going to go take him until at the least the end of the season, the next Rule 5 draft. But also, he's barely performed, and when he's performed, he hasn't produced. So I'm curious. I want it to work out. I'm really curious to see what happens in 2024 for Lacy. A couple other guys. Mason Black of the San Francisco Giants. 2021 third rounder out of Lehigh. He's a righty. 29 starts between AA and AAA last year. 4-9 with a 3.71 ERA and 123 2/3 innings. 155 strikeouts, so 11.3 per 9, to 52 walks, 3.8 per 9, and 16 home runs allowed. He is a sinker slider guy, but he's got some other stuff I think that makes him a little more intriguing than your usual sinker slider guy. So the sinker sits mid-90s. He can run it up to 98. He has both a sweeper for his slider and he has a cutter. So he's got multiple options there. I've seen him throw occasional four-seam fastballs. I've seen him throw occasional changeups. And so it's really a 3-pitch mix when you add that cutter in there, and then the potential to maybe do more with the four-seam fastball and the changeup. And it feels like a little bit better velocity than a lot of sinker slider guys have. A lot of sinker slider guys, it feels like they're throwing 92. He's out here 95, again, touching 98. So it's almost like a power or turbo sinker combined with a sweeper, which is, one, usually the better performing as far as swing and miss version of a slider. And then two, a pitch that he is able to throw to both sides of the plate. He's able to throw it to lefties and righties. And so, yes, he's a sinker slider pitcher, but he may be the best potential version of a sinker slider pitcher. So very curious to see what he does this year. San Francisco is a team that needs starters. And so let's check it out. Let's see what happens. And then left-hand pitcher Brycen Mautz of the St. Louis Cardinals. Second rounder in 2022 out of San Diego. Got 23 games in single A. 4-9 with an ERA just under 4. 105 1/3 innings. 112 strikeouts, so 9.6 per 9. To 15 walks, 1.3 per 9. And 4 home runs allowed, 0.3 per 9 innings. So, college guy in single A. I've got a little bit of questions. Another sinker slider guy is more of that traditional velocity that you think of when you think of a sinker slider guy. Sitting in the low 90s, but he does get chase on the slider. And then he's got a changeup that he throws pretty often to righties. He likes to go to the changeup against righties. And so I've got questions about, it's a college guy who pitched pretty well in single A. And we've had this conversation before about how a lot of guys in single A end up not being major leaguers. And the approaches aren't always great in single A, both from hitters and from pitchers. And so you have questions whenever somebody who is technically the right age for single A, but in reality for a actual prospect is a little bit old for single A. When they not even dominate, but just he didn't even dominate. It was a ERA, again, almost at 3.98. You have questions about how well does that stuff and those game plans translate to the next level. So I'm really curious to see what he does when he gets to high A this year. I want to see what he looks like. Does he need to sequence better? Because he goes to that changeup really quickly, rather often. Does he need to sequence better? Does he get the same sort of swing and miss on the slider? And does the lack of fastball velocity come back to hurt him when he faces better hitters that are better able to, one, read ball from strike out of the hand, and two, catch up to a low 90s sinker and put a good swing on it? So, curious to see what happens there. In just a minute, had some questions about a couple guys who had good years in the DSL. We'll talk about them next, as well as how you should treat players in the Dominican. We'll do that next, right here on Locked On MLB Prospects. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the things that bring home the winning trophy, are also what keeps your vehicle running at peak performance. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to that peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. They have over 122 million parts for your vehicle, and you will always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay's guaranteed fit, that part's also guaranteed to fit your vehicle every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. I drive a Jeep Wrangler. I have had a ton of success going and finding whatever specific part it may be, whether it's an OEM part or an aftermarket part, on eBay Motors. And what's great is I can bring home the prices I need the parts I need at the prices I want. So keep your vehicle running at peak performance at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to Locked On MLB Prospects, and quick reminder before we get into this final segment that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube and now also on Amazon Fire TV. So Locked On Sports Today, 24/7 feed, national shows like this one, top sports stories of the day with the local Locked On shows and the local experts. Find the Locked On Sports Today channel now on YouTube, on Amazon Fire TV, and soon, very soon, on Roku TV devices. Okay, couple questions about guys that we missed. Yofri Rodriguez, the outfielder for the Milwaukee Brewers. A lot of Brewers talk in this episode, but this came up because MLB.com or MLB Pipeline put out an article about each team's top prospect in 2026, and he was the choice for the top prospect for the Brewers, and one of our prominent Brewers fans in our Discord had literally never heard of him because he was only in the DSL last year. And so, hey, tell me about this guy. So, again, IFA in 2023, lefty hitting guy, 52 games in the DSL last year. 253, 393, 449. 6 homers, 21 extra base hits, 41 walks to 40 strikeouts, and 12 and 19 on stolen bases. So, a couple things here for Yofri Rodriguez. One, the approach and the hit tool were very good in the DSL. And yes, there's the caveat of DSL pitching, almost like a rule, is not good. But 80% contact overall, 85% in the zone, and chase rate was around 15%. So very good approach, making pitchers enter the zone, very little swing and miss in the zone. The power numbers were below MLB average, but remember, he was 17 years old, right? So the average exit velo was 86.5, and the 90th percentile was 101. But you could see the power production, again, 6 homers and 21 extra base hits in 52 games. And when you watch, and I caught a little bit of film for this, you can see he's got some ability to get out in front of a ball and backspin it to get homer power to his pull side, right? And then when you watch him play as far as defense and things like that, not a ton of video of defense in the DSL, but the tools that make up the defense, the speed, all of that look to be somewhere between above average and plus. 12 and 19 on stolen bases is a weird amount, and it makes me think either the instincts aren't great or the speed's probably closer to above average than plus. But either way, he played 36 games in center, 8 in right, 5 in left, and DH'd a couple times. The thing to watch for is the Brewers, and they talk about this in the article, the Brewers have been really interested in taking their best performing prospect or their top prospects from the DSL, skipping the complex league altogether, and putting them into full season ball in Carolina. Jackson Chourio did that. Luis Lara did that. And so if Yofri Rodriguez does that, it wouldn't be that surprising because that's the thing that they like to do. But also that's a sign that they're really high on his ceiling and what he could be in the future. So watch for his assignment for 24. The other one, shortstop Starlin Caba of the Philadelphia Phillies. IFA again last year, 38 games in the DSL before an elbow injury ended his season. 301, 423, 346. 4 extra base hits, no homers here. 28 walks to 16 strikeouts, and 16 to 22 on stolen bases. People that I trust who have seen more of him than I have said he is a very good defender. I heard the words great. So no grades on this, but I think some of the scouting reports out there, Pipeline, Baseball America, whatever, have like 60s across the board on the defensive stuff. Contact ability, 90% overall contact, 95% in the zone. The big question is going to be, what is the power ceiling? And then, is he a good enough defensive shortstop where that doesn't matter? I think that's going to be the big things to wonder about. But you will see him this year. I believe you'll probably see him either in Complex League or in Single A. He was also named in this article as their potential top prospect in 2026 for the Phillies. So Starlin Caba, another guy that they really... And I've been asked before about why we don't do more to cover the DSL and international free agency and all of that. And this is a pretty positive show, right? I don't like to talk about what guys can't do. I like to talk about what guys can do. We assume any prospect we talk about is going to make MLB when we're discussing them and their outlooks and things like that. But my reluctance to dive too deep into the Dominican Summer League is rooted, I think, in two different places. One is I am just one person, and there are already 120 full season minor league teams that I'm trying to keep up with what's going on across the minors every day throughout the season. So if you add in complex league teams, and then you add in the Dominican, knowing that some organizations have 2 teams down there, it goes from 120 teams to close to 200. And it's just, at a certain point, you just don't have any bandwidth to do that. And so I think it's something where I know I can't give you the fully fleshed and thorough content you deserve. And so because of that, I just don't necessarily put too much into it. But the other part, and this is really tough to talk about and to admit and discuss, most of these players, after they sign, you're not going to hear from them again. They're not going to make it stateside. They're not going to be part of the organization for more than 2 or 3 seasons. They'll be released and they'll be replaced. I had a prospect tell me one time that the worst insult that he ever heard a minor league coach say to his team was, 20 of you have a job so that those 5 guys have a team to play on. And unfortunately, the way that international free agency works is you have a lot of players, you have some players that sign for a lot of money. Caba got $3 million. Rodriguez got a couple $1 million. Like, they signed for a lot of money. But then you also have players that are signed for virtually nothing. And if they work out, great. Ellie De La Cruz didn't sign for very much. Junior Caminero didn't sign for very much. They work out, great. But so many of those players are signed to fill out the rosters so that you have enough to field a team or two teams in the Dominican. And that is really tough. And we try to stay positive here, and it's hard to spend too much time in the Dominican learning about these players when you have to face the realization that most of them are not going to show up. You're never going to see them again. And so I'm going to do a better job this year of getting experts, whether it's Chris Klug from Dynasty Dugout, Jim Callis from MLB.com, other experts who can more often come on and talk about the notable guys you need to know about in the DSL. But that's just not something that I have the bandwidth, both from a workload perspective and an emotional perspective, to do every single day. Fantastic week this week. A couple more things coming up. We have a college baseball draft kind of primer coming this week. We have odds for Rookie of the Year and a top prospect conversation coming up. A lot of other things. Going to be tons of fun. In the meantime, if you got mailbag questions, I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. Show's on Twitter at Locked On Farm. We've also got email, Discord, all of that. It's in the episode description. It's in the show notes, in the link tree. Until tomorrow's episode, remember, it's always a great time to pay a minor leaguer.